Hello, I'm John BenderWaffles Aljets, and today we're breaking ground on some towns. Today we're looking at how to create towns and villages and such, also known as the fun stuff. We have 3 towns and 1 castle to do, so we have a lot of ground to cover. Get it? Ground to cover? You're going to be covering ground with buildings? No? Now, it's been a while since we worked with the map creation tools within RPG Maker, but we should be fine. If you need a refresher on where all the tools are and such, you can click on this link here to watch my previous video on map creation. Now, something you'll notice is we're going to be making the leap from VX Ace to MV. This is largely because MV is the new sexy and has a bunch more features that I personally find quite enticing. Don't worry though, as almost everything I show you in these videos will still be applicable to older versions. With that all said, let's get developing. Alright, hello everyone. So, I'm not going to be running camera today because I'm kind of sick as of the recording of this tutorial, so I look gross, and so you don't need to see me anyways, it's not that important. So here we are, we're in the tutorial. We're looking at the world map. Yay, world map's back. So we have a couple of cities to talk about and a castle to talk about. So we have the snow village here, the port town here, and the desert village over here. Now, I've already gone ahead and I've made a couple of the towns already. We are going to take a look at them and we're going to talk about them. I'm going to go over some kind of the basic points that you need to be looking for when you're building towns, and then I will go ahead and do the desert village while you watch, and then I'm going to sort of on my own work through the castle, and I'm going to do that at super speed so that you could just like sort of watch me do it while I might have a voiceover going over top of it, just kind of talk about things. Because really a castle, at least when I do them, are just kind of towns on steroids. So that's going to be kind of the same thing as this snow village here, just a lot bigger. So speaking of snow village, we're going to take a look at that first. Here's what I got. So the snow village is the first town in the game. So it's going to be very small. It's going to be very basic. Now when you look at this, you might think to yourself, gee, that kind of looks vaguely reminiscent of a town from something like Pokemon or something of that nature. And there's a reason for that. I got my start with RPG development with Pokemon ROM hacking. So my style of towns is very reminiscent of the Pokemon games on the Game Boy Advance, specifically Leaf Green and Fire Red. You should go check those out. There will be a link somewhere on the screen which will send you over to the Poke community, where you can take a look at some of the work of the ROM hackers over there, and you can look at towns and sort of get an idea for where I'm coming from. Now, you should really look at the games that you enjoy and sort of develop a style based off of that. Think back to towns for games that you enjoy. When I'm thinking of JRPGs, one of the first things that pops into my mind is Besaid Village in Final Fantasy X. It's a very memorable place for me. So your goal when you're designing villages is to try to create those memorable places for your players. That's sort of a very roundabout way of getting to that point, but anyways, let's continue on. So with this first starting village, we knew that we needed to have a house for the player, and I didn't want to be introducing them to too many mechanics too quickly. So this town does not have a shop. It has an inn, so that's going to introduce players to the inn mechanic, even though this inn, it would make sense for this inn to not really function since the player has a house here, but they will be introduced to the mechanic in this town. That's just something to keep in mind as you're going through developing your game. Think about the flow of your game and think about when you need to be introducing ideas. You don't want to pile everything on all at once, but you also don't necessarily want to be holding their hand too much. So just try to find that nice balance of how you're introducing things. But anyways, that's a tangent. I'm sorry, that was unimportant. So obviously it's a village in a more northern region of the map. So it's covered in snow. Also, if you notice, it's completely surrounded by trees. That's because if you look at the world map here, you'll see that there's spots of trees, and you could assume that this little forest here probably goes up into here. And the idea when you're developing towns is you want to take a look at what you have on the world map and try to in some way represent that through your map. Like, you want people to feel like this town here belongs there on the world map. Does that make sense? I don't know why I ask you that question. It's not like you can tell me. I mean, I guess you could tell me in the comments down below and ask for further questions. Or, you know, you could ask me on Facebook or on Patreon or something of that nature. But, selfless plug. Anyways, so I've added in all these trees to kind of try to tie that in. I went a little bit overboard because note that, like, really the player can go to here and he can maybe see to, like, here. And that's about it. Whenever you're making maps, you want to take into consideration what your player can see. So if you want to, like, hide something, I'm trying to remember. I think a player character stock can see about, I want to say 8 tiles in front of them within default RPG Maker. Don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely positive. I know intuitively how far the player can see, but not necessarily like the number. But anyways, just, you don't necessarily need all of this here, but you know, I wanted things to be nice and square. So that's our snowy village. You can do something similar when you were designing it for your own game. I would say don't copy this exactly, but maybe have this video open while you're working on yours and just kind of, you know, use it for reference. Now for the second town that the player will go to is the port town down here. Now I've gone ahead and done that one. This is much simpler than the snowy town, village, whatever I'm deciding to call it, snow village. Because it's a walled off area and some water. I mean, there's nothing super complicated about this, but it has its own distinct aesthetic style that is going to differentiate it from the snow village. Like, people are going to be able to kind of, this is going to be memorable in different ways than this is. And not just because, you know, this is covered in snow or whatever, but also just because this is a very, like, in tune with nature, very, like, I don't know, it's very much a hippie village, I guess, not to be, like, offensive to people who are hippies, but it's much more in touch with nature, whereas this is a lot more developed and it's a lot more built around this economy of having this harbor here, this port. It's a lot more developed, and you're seeing a lot more of, you know, you got people with chimneys and things of that nature, and we have shops here. We have our first item shop, and this is a combination item and weapon shop, or armor and weapon shop, sorry. And we've got this nice lovely little centerpiece just to kind of give the area some character. Now you'll notice that there's this building here that it's not an item shop, it's not an inn, and it's probably not going to be a story specific building. When you're building villages, you want them to feel alive, and villages aren't just places where people go to buy items, they are places where people live. So it's probably a good idea to include, when you're designing villages, a few buildings where people can live, where people will call them home. So that's a very important thing to think about. It's not always necessary to have a in-game reason for a building to exist. So now that I've gone over some, like, very basic, very broad ideas, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start work on this desert village here. And how we do that is we're going to right click on the world map here and click new. That is going to create a map that is a child to the world map. It really doesn't serve a lot of purposes other than just being sort of organizationally a good idea. I don't think organizationally is a real word, but I'm going to go with it. So on map name, we're just going to call it Desert Village. For display name, we're going to do the same thing. Now the display name is what will pop up in the corner of the screen when the player enters that map. So they'll be able to see, like, if an area has a name, it will appear on screen. It'll be like, oh, this is what it's called. It's called, the Desert Village. For tile set, we are going to go with exterior. Make sure you change this, otherwise you're going to be working with a world map tile set again. Super important. Now for this map, we want it to be fairly wide and not super deep, I guess, with its height. So width, we're going to go 30. Height, we are going to go 25. Scroll type, no loop. Steps, no. We aren't going to mess with sound yet. Parallaxing, we aren't going to mess with anything else. So once you have those numbers and everything kind of implemented, and note that the width and height of yours might be different, feel free to experiment and play around and kind of get a look that you want. This is just what I want. It's a good idea to have some basic plans laid out before you go ahead and do this. I like to get a piece of, you can't see that I'm holding this, but if you can hear me waving it, it's a piece of graph paper that I have taken, and I've kind of drawn a very rough idea of what I'm doing. So we're just going to go ahead and click OK. So just go ahead and, basically I'm just saying just plan stuff out. So before we do anything, we are going to go take a look at the world map, and we are looking for geographical features that we might want to work into the map. You see there's water right there. So maybe in the sort of northwestern part of the map, we'll want to have some water showing. I know that it's not showing on the map, but maybe we want some sort of rock, some sort of stone feature around here, because in deserts you got a lot of like cliff faces and sort of things of that nature. It's just to kind of characterize it up, because otherwise it's just going to be a place in desert. Just lots of sand. I don't like sand. It gets everywhere. So anyways, let's go back to this. So as you'll see, we're going to look over here at our exterior tiles. This is slightly different than what we had on the world map. We have a bunch of different tabs, and it includes buildings and rocks and statues and all that sort of stuff, and then walls and dirt and all this sort of stuff. I want to draw your attention to these tiles, specifically the ones that are in this region here. Those tiles are called auto tiles. Now what auto tiles are, if I'll just go ahead and I'll just pick one and I'll just kind of show you. When you place them down, they sort of just look like how they do on the map, or on the tile set selector thingy over here. Sorry, I'm really sick and I'm super tired. But anyways, gotta get this video out. Gotta get it out. It's been way too long. Anyways, so sitting like that, it looks exactly like how it does over here. But as soon as I put down another tile, bam, it starts to transform, and it changes depending on how many tiles of the same type that I have near it. So you wind up with like very interesting walls and things of that nature, and you can get, sort of corners going. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So you see there, we've got very much like a ledge. But anyways, it's important for map creation with an RPG Maker. I'm not going to go too in-depth on them, like how they work and things of that nature, until I eventually someday maybe show you how to make your own tile sets. I might talk about auto tiles, but for now, you just kind of need to know how they function, and really, when you start using them, they become very intuitive. It's really not difficult to figure out. So we're going to go ahead, and the very first step for making a desert is we're going to find out which desert tile, like which sand tile we want to use. So we're in your paint, just go fill. That looks like sand. That really looks like sand. But we're going to go with this one. It's a very lighter sand. I like it. And we're also going to put that water in the northwest corner, like I said I was going to, because I am a man of my word. Nope, I don't like that. That's grass tile. That's kind of dumb. We're gonna make this actually take up a bit more of the map and kind of go up over here. Yeah. When you're making a map, try to be a bit more random in your placements. You don't want a lot of pattern because that's not how things appear naturally. You won't see a lot of, you don't see a perfect, square in nature. You don't. It doesn't happen. And if it does, it's extreme oddity. So we want to, when we're building something like this, we want to keep people within the sort of city play area. So we want to kind of define borders for them. So we're going to go ahead and we are actually going to put some cliffs around this town. And again, making sure that things aren't uniform. So this is just kind of a lot of playing around. Any sort of time that you are making maps, it's gonna be a lot of just sort of playing with things and getting things to be the way that you want them to be. So we are just kind of doing a thing. When you're trying to make an entryway, try to sort of keep it. No, you don't ever want an entryway into a map that's a one tile space. So what I mean by it is this is going to be our entryway, and this is 4 tiles across. So if we had it so that it was only, like, let's say that they only came in through this one, that's going to feel very claustrophobic, and it's going to feel very it's going to feel off, it's going to feel odd, it's going to feel not natural. So don't do that unless you're very specifically trying to make your people feel claustrophobic. So I don't think that's where we're going to go. We're just going to cut that off entirely. We're going to do that. So again, it's just kind of experimenting, just sort of play with stuff to get it the way that you want it to be. Yeah. So not the best tile work in the world, but I will just sort of deal with it. So there we go. Yeah. I don't like that. So instead we're going to do this. Yes, no, maybe. Yes, we're going to do that. So now we have like our area where we can start placing our buildings. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go over to tab C here and scroll all the way down, and now we have our building parts. So for this town, it's, wood is kind of the way we're going to go. I like to start with the back corners of buildings. So these back corners, if you see, there's a little bit of transparency. So you can have them overlapping wall segments like that. And RPG Maker MV will automatically take that into account and will do your layers. I believe that it has 3 layers built in. So just kind of go through and just sort of build up your buildings. Now note that you don't really want to have just like a whole bunch of squares, because squares are very uninteresting from a sort of visual standpoint. They're just not that cool to look at. So try to kind of stay away from just having all, square buildings. And we'll get to some examples of how to do that in the future. So we're going to place a wall down. And there we go. We have a nice little hut. We're going to go over here to B, where we have all of these door tiles, and we're going to take one, and we are going to make a door. Try not to have the door be perfectly centered, because that's going to, it's just, I mean, you can on some, but every building, it shouldn't be centered. It's, again, it's getting back to visual appeal. It's just not very interesting to have them look like that. So now we've got one building there, and that needs to be, that's going to be an item shop. So, or you know what, that's going to be our weapon and armor shop. So we're going to place that, and again, it will automatically do the layering in MV. Now let's go ahead, and we need to be making, you know what, I kind of want one of these buildings to be a tent. So I'm actually going to take this tent here, and you can right click and drag in the tiles that are on the map to choose multiple tiles to place. And I'm actually going to place this one right there. So it's going to be a tent, and that tent is going to be our item shop. See how that is? We're going to go here, and we're going to start placing down the tiles for our inn. Now our inn is going to be not rectangular, because that's, as I said, not interesting. So try to bear with me on this. We are going to do one of these. Do. So there are these specific tiles in the tile set. You see here, they look like these or like these, that allow you to do these sort of right angle turns in the opposite direction, so that you can get sort of L-shaped buildings. Or, you know, buildings that maybe you want to build a building that has, you know, I don't know, maybe it looks like it has a front sort of entryway kind of thing that looks like that. You know, you can do that, and I will probably do that in the castle town. But right now we just want the inn to have its entryway over here. If you look, I did this in both the Port Town and the Snow Village, and actually here it is, your little entryway section. As I was mentioning, you just kind of just give your buildings different shapes, give them make them more interesting, so that it's just more visually appealing for people to look at. So we're going to go yet again and put our door, and we're going to put our door right there, and we'll get our sign for the inn. So now we're sort of running short on room, but what we're going to do is we're going to place another tent, because this is a city that is not fully sort of developed, but it's getting there. So we're going to put a tent right there, and then we're going to put down another building right about, we'll start it right about here. I'm going with the front on this one because I want to be able to see where it goes. And this is going to be a very shallow building. This is just a house. I'm sure this is easily the most thrilling episode of my show that you have ever watched, but that's okay. Bam. And that's just some dude's house. Now, this technically functions as a town, as it is, but it's not very exciting looking. Yeah, I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to place another tent, and I'm going to place that tent right here. So, yeah. But anyways, so what we're going to do is we're going to add in, we're going to do like a road sort of thing, because maybe it's, you know, maybe it's, I say that, you know, maybe it's not that developed, but, you know, maybe it is. Maybe it's more developed than we necessarily let on, or that they that on. So we are going to, in fact, have developed roads that go to all of the tents. So that kind of looks nice. You know, it has its finer points. But now, what's one thing on the world map that is all over the desert here that we have yet to represent? Trees! So we're going to go into the desert village, and we're going to take the palm tree, and we're going to start placing palm trees. Note that we can overlap the top because players are going to be able to walk under those. And actually, there is something that I am forgetting about buildings because I am not a bright person, and that is freaking windows, man. So just take a window tile. I prefer this window tile. It is my favorite window tile. You could also use this window tile, which actually I feel like will make sense for this village. And we're gonna place some windows. I usually try to not place windows immediately on corners because to me that just doesn't look right. But you can go ahead and do whatever you want because it's your village, man. So there, that looks a lot more natural because like now there's windows. I'm sorry, I was just not paying very much attention. Let's go back to our pine trees or palm trees. I am just the worst, man. So, oops. Yeah, we're just gonna kind of scatter these about and just sort of place them all over because, well, why not? You know, there's not really a lot of sort of real rhyme or reason to what we're doing. We just kind of do whatever. And if you want, you can actually do this and do rows of palm trees because they will naturally stack on top of each other. You just got to make sure that you place only bottoms first and then go over and place the tops on top of them, if that makes any sense. So we are actually going to do that so that we get rows and rows and rows, man. So yeah, palm tree it up and just kind of throw them wherever. Just kind of be haphazard about it. Trees are something that, like, you know, it's a naturally occurring thing. Like, there isn't necessarily going to be any sort of real sense of order to what is going on. And you may have moments where you're like, you know what, I don't think that some of these things look good. You know, I feel like that looks too natural or too sort of like it's too busy. You know, because I look at this and right now I'm like, yeah, I'm not really liking the way that goes, but that's okay because I'm gonna keep experimenting. And I'm going to add some stuff in. Like, you know, it's a town. There's going to be, like, barrels and stuff sort of sitting around. And we're going to zoom in so that we can get a better look at what is going on. You know, we need a well in this town. So we're going to find a spot where... Actually, you know what? We don't need a well in this town. They're right next to a freaking river. Durr. I should have been thinking about that. We are going to have a sign that's going to be like, hey, this way to that, that way to that. Maybe we'll have a sign out here that's like, hey, that's a thing. So, you know, put some freaking pots around here, man. You know, maybe there's a fire pit outside one of these tents. You know, because people live in them. And, you know, maybe we'll put, you know, more barrels. More barrels. You know, honestly, already this is starting to look quite a bit better to me. You know, I'm just putting things wherever. You know, let's see how it looks with some rocks. I don't like the rocks. Let's not use the rocks. So, but anyways, you get the idea. You know, this isn't the best town I've ever made by any stretch of the imagination. There's a lot of places that just like there's nothing there. But that's okay. You kind of just play with things and you experiment and you put things, you place things, and you sort of play with it, and you'll eventually get things looking and feeling the way that you want them to. A good rule of thumb that I keep in mind when I'm building towns or cities is I try to think about, if a player is standing in a location, are they going to see something interesting in every tile that they're standing on? Is there going to be something to look at? You don't want a lot of dead space. Over here, there's a crap ton of dead space. But it's okay. I'm going to play with this more, and I'm going to work with it more off camera, because I kind of just want to move on to something else. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to walk away from it, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to have a new fresh set of eyes, which is kind of an idea. It's something that you will probably want to do as developers quite a bit, is if you're working on something, work on it for a while, get it to a place that you feel okay with, and then walk away. Just go do something else, go play a game, go do something, and then come back to it, and you will find that you have a more fresh take on what you're looking at, a more like you have, I'm trying to think how to say this, you have a more open perspective on it because you've been able to sort of remove yourself from it. Because as a developer, you're going to look at your work and you're going to think one of two things. You are either going to think that what you made is the greatest thing ever, even though it is objectively not, or you are going to think that it is the absolute worst thing ever, even though odds are it is also objectively not. So just sort of keep that in mind. I actually don't think I'm going to do the castle in this video. I will probably do a speed development video about the castle, which will be released later on this weekend. So be sure to look for that. That will be a bonus video. But as it stands, that is what I had to say about towns, guys. And with that, we bring today to a close. Hopefully you learned something, or at least were inspired to get out there and create your own towns and cities. In the next episode, we will take a look at scripting basic NPCs. You can click on this button here to go to that video. If it isn't up, that button will instead take you to my channel where you can subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, guys, you can give it a like, leave a comment down below, or even support me directly via my Patreon. Click this button here or the link down in the description to do that. I'll see you guys next time when I eat a watermelon whole and shoot the seeds out of my mouth like a machine gun.